Jeff Durkin with We Are Change Connecticut out here in Hartford, and we just caught up with Kevin Gallagher, head of Free Barrett Brown. Kevin, thanks for the interview, and tell us first, for people who aren't familiar with the case, basically for watching this for the first time, what's Barrett's case all about, just for people, and just kind of a rundown of what's happened up to this point.
Sure. So Barrett Brown is an American journalist who was involved with Anonymous for some time, but he's also been a journalist and a writer for years before he got into that. And he was raided in early 2012 by the FBI. No charges were filed, but they did search his apartment, his mother's house, and so what happened was they were threatening his mom with charges, and over the course of 6 months, he grew very upset about that. So eventually he uploaded a video to YouTube where he was complaining about the FBI agent in the case and the fact that this agent was threatening his mom and asking for them to give his stuff back and stuff like that. They used that as a pretext to arrest him. Once he was arrested, he was indicted for allegedly threatening the agent, and they also indicted him for sharing a link to information that was hacked out of Stratfor. And they also indicted him for obstruction of justice. And the case is really about the criminalization of dissent and the U.S. government targeting journalists, to prevent them from putting a focus on these issues, such as Anonymous and things like that. As it stands right now, he's entered a guilty plea, and he's going to be sentenced in August. He faces 8.5 years max in jail.
And it was even a bigger charge early on, almost over 100 years, and it brought down to where it was a hyperlink charge. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. What was the government's position for dropping that from 100 to then 8.5?
Yeah, so originally he was overcharged based on the, sending a link. It was these identity theft and fraud charges that, carry these mandatory minimum sentences that are outrageous. And the merits of that charge itself were flawed. And eventually the government recognized this. They dropped all the charges in March of this year. And that's what brought him down from facing 105 years in jail to then 70 years, and then they worked on a plea agreement which reduced the charges even further to now 8.5.
And mentioning it too, it also shows, Barrett also writing several articles, a well-researched journalist. People could check it out. It is definitely encourage it for amazing work on investigating in different case investigative journalism. And it shows too also the criminalization of journalism that you mentioned, and also whistleblowers like that with the Espionage Act and other cases like that. It really shows a precedent also, and just the examples of cases Barrett has covered as a journalist, if you could give a few.
Yeah, so Barrett was covering the private intelligence contractors and things like that. He had a group called Project PM, whose role was basically to search through the emails that were pilfered from HB Gary and Stratfor to find things of journalistic import. So he was really working on the surveillance issues and the way that this is privatized, and he was looking at firms, in particular firms like Palantir, Booz Allen Hamilton, Cubic, and Endgame Systems, and other firms like these who are extremely secretive, and yet it's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry that doesn't receive much scrutiny.
And it also shows several different things the government has tried, also putting a gag order to prevent him from even writing from jail or getting out articles about his conditions in jail. What's the state of that now in comparison to before, if anything's changed?
Yeah, so the gag order has since been lifted, but as you note, that was really outrageous, extremely excessive to curtail someone's First Amendment rights like that. And so it's just one example of how this case has been rife with intimidation. Not only threatening his mother with charges, but the gag order. They also, attempted to seize $20,000 that we had raised for his legal defense. They failed to do that, but these are the types of things that have happened in this case, and which I think are really concerning.
It is for anybody watching, or for journalists and people like that, to show how much the government really goes after, people that are doing real investigative work, real journalism, and meanwhile other issues don't get covered, and the government focuses all on people like that. What could people learn more about Barrett's case and even some of his writings for people to show, his really amazing talent for covering these issues that you mentioned?
Yeah, Barrett is a really great writer. He's still writing from prison. He publishes a column every 2 weeks. It's called the Barrett Brown Review of Art and Letters in Jail. It's on Front Burner D Magazine's website. And so in our website as well for the Defense Fund is freebarrettbrown.org. You can also follow us on Twitter at freebarrett_. And just keep following the case. The sentencing is going to be really interesting. We really hope that he gets time served, and that because it's just ridiculous. He takes responsibility. He recognizes that he may have crossed a line in some respects, but he shouldn't serve more than 2 years that he's already been in there.
It shows also, just with this case and several others that mentioned earlier, is just the aspect of the criminalization of dissent and also journalism, investigative journalism, and it really shows just a trend of where this is going. From your opinion, I know it's hard to see it from related to Barrett's case, but just as a optimistic tone, if you have any. I mean, it's hard to find that now, but just the aspect of where you think you see it continuing.
Well, the good thing is that we hope that Barrett is going to get out soon, and that he's going to continue his journalism. He's going to pick up where he left off, and he pretty much just wants to put this behind him and continue with his life, and just get on with it. Like I said, he's been there over almost 650 days now, and I think that's more than enough.
Could definitely say that for sure. For somebody like that, and when the government goes after somebody like that just that much, it really shows just the attitude of where the government's priorities are to clample investigative journalism instead of going after real criminals in different sectors. Anything else you'd like to mention about Barrett's case, or also Barrett himself? What would people, one thing or a couple of things that you can mention about Barrett as a person and also a journalist, if anything else you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, well, as I was saying, he's a really talented journalist. He's a brilliant writer, so I think people should familiarize themselves with his work. He's written for Huffington Post, Vanity Fair, and The Guardian. You can still find all those pieces. You can read his column, and other than that, we're going to have a leniency campaign where we're going to be petitioning the judge to give him time served, and so anybody who wants to will be able to write a letter to help us convince, to help us do that.
A colleague of mine, Barrett Brown, is currently locked in a cage facing a potential 100 years in prison for what I believe is an effort to silence him. And we're also seeing the administration go after whistleblowers.
There's this pop culture idea of the trial in America, that the trial is the place where justice is done, where two equal sides battle it out to find the truth. And this is such bullshit. Anyone who has been in a court for any amount of time realizes